It doesn't. Can you hear me on Zoom now? No?
Can you hear me now?
Okay, this is going to be awkward because I wave things around all the time. So just don't let this be a big distraction. My name is Laura Devon. I am the director of the Northeast Kansas Library System, and we're in Lawrence. We are not in a library, so we are just system staff in our own building. And I don't get the pleasure of getting to run a library. I just have to run a system. So Harry's got a harder job by far. I've been with the regional library system since 1995. And I came from a farm equipment dealership. Okay, I came from the private sector. So I've worked in the private sector, I've worked in the government sector. I am not a CPA, and Steve's going to be my correctional person all day long. He's going to correct me. And I told him I was going to say this. He is your money god. So anytime you have a question about money, and that means all sorts of uses of money, sorry, I'm ginning up work. It's important to have somebody you can go to. You can always call me if you want, but I would start with those nearest and dearest and hunt them down and get your answers. So we're going to cook some books for success. This costume was made by an employee at Nichols. She retired. Terry loved the theater. And when I did a presentation not like this the very first time, she brought this into me as a surprise. She said, you cannot do something with that kind of title without the appropriate costume. So it actually has some really cute neon sunglasses, which I'll show you as the very last slide in your handout, but I wasn't going to wear those all day. So can we still hear me even if I, okay. All right, so we're going to cook some books. These are ones you could show the IRS, by the way. This isn't the second set of books. So we're going to start by setting the table. We're not going to dive right in and talk about money because there are those strings behind the money that you have to understand really well. So I call it the 3 M's of library leadership. Your board and your director work together to provide a mission, to manage, and to obtain the money for your organization. This is not just the board's responsibility, and it's certainly not just the director's responsibility. So you need to work in a cooperative manner because budget falls under all 3 of those categories. It's confusing, it's frustrating, and they like to tell you you're eating bonbons and reading books. It's just not so. So I'm gonna mess this whole slide up, but I want you to see these things. I've listed 3 statutes. How many of you are city libraries? All but Francis, and Francis is a, oh yes, special. You're a special library, so you don't have to do the budget forms, but you probably have to do the internal budget. So we'll play with this. So this is for the rest of you, but Francis might enjoy it. This is a website that you probably ought to know on a general basis. Just because when we give you those legislative alerts, this is a good place to start for who do you contact. The important thing is to note, because I've done this and gotten all excited, and it was an old statute. You want to make sure up here it talks about the current legislative year, because if you Google a concern, so if I type in a statute number, I want to go to KSA 1220, 1220, it's going to maybe, the first link is going to maybe be the legislative year for 2015. It wouldn't matter in that statute's case, but it could. So I always recommend starting here. If you're going to have a statute, don't Google the statute. Get over to the legislative page and make sure you're in the current year. So you can see anything they've changed up to this point. So if I'm going to go in here, I'm going to have to go hunting a little bit. But if I go to bills and laws, I'm going to go down to statute. If you look here, you just have to know that library law is in the 12th chapter. You could search for 1220 here, but I wanted to take you in the long way. So it's Article 12 of the 12th chapter of statute. Nice big fat books. They issue them every year to the legislators. They get new statute books, or they used to. Okay, so here is 1220. I also mentioned 1226. So let's look at 1226. See if we can center it a little better. It's confusing because it combines all the libraries plus Johnson County plus Wyandotte County. So this is an everybody else but statute, kind of. So this first part is what applies to the treasurer of your board. And this is where the bonding statement is for statute. Now, how many of your treasurers do everything for the library? Whoa. They do all the money things, absolutely all of them. May I lay down and faint? And you come revive me, because that's very unusual. The rest of you were sitting on your hands, so I'm guessing you do some part of playing with the money. And in the large cases, you do everything but the final signature. They still have to have a bond because they are the legal suing point, if it were. I would talk to your insurance carrier and see if you can get you on the bond. You don't have to be on the same amount of money, but anybody who handles the money on a regular basis ought to be on this bond. They can bond employees, positions, so they could bond the director. Well, it varies so with insurance companies. Kansas Public Insurance is an insurance company that works strictly with municipalities, and they do more position bonding rather than some places take it. Our treasurer is bonded, and I'm bonded, and our business manager is bonded on what's called a fidelity bond. And they actually do background checks on you. You know, have you taken bankruptcy? They go out and look at you because they're ensuring your financial integrity, such as it is. And then that way, when you walk off with the money, the library's covered. And that sounds kind of funny, but it's happened. It has happened. Treasurers have actually, before banking laws got a lot tighter than they were, they could do a little bit of less cash and take a small piece of every deposit that went in for the library. Nobody ever noticed for a long time. That's happened. They have had directors that have gone crazy on credit cards, weren't checked. It happens. So you have to bond for fraud. You just do. Okay. So this takes you in to the library law stuff, but I wanted to back you up to this so you made sure you were in the right year. Because occasionally we tell you there's a bill that's causing problems, and you've got to be in the right year to see the bill. Okay, so these are the things that the library board does. They set that policy in coordination with the director. They approve a strategic plan that hopefully the whole staff and the board have worked together to develop. They make the major programming direction decisions. You know, where is this library going? How do we see ourselves? What's important, what's not? And of course, they have to follow all of Kansas library law, and it gets complicated, and your library bylaws. So here you are. You hire and fire all the rest of the staff if you're lucky enough to be large enough to have some. You're laughing. But, you know, if not, you better be the best employee in that building because you're it. You really have to be the baseline developer of the budget because you're the one handling it on the ground level. You're touching all the coins, so to speak. So when a policy needs revised, talk to your system, get some good examples, give them a base starting point. They don't have to prove exactly what you wrote. If they don't like it, they can revise it, but give them a place to start that discussion. You manage whatever that budget is, and you're constantly tweaking your operations to reflect how much money are we getting, what's in most demand. You know, we're starting a crystal ball process here for 2018. We're not done with 2017, and I hope you're done with your annual reporting on 2016, but you might not be quite at this point. So you could have 3 years running in your head all the time, and that's hard, but that's your job. That's what you do. So, and you implement whatever policies there are, but you're the one that gets to develop the procedures on how they do those things. You're going to have to help the board draw that line between policy and procedure. Because the tendency is to, while we're talking about it, we're going to figure out for you how you do it. And that's really not their place. And frankly, it gets them down below weed level. They're groveling in the dirt. They need to fly over the plants and look down. And policy is up here, procedures down here. It's confusing. I get confused. You have to have somebody else read it and go, but this could change and it wouldn't affect the policy. If how you do it doesn't affect the policy, it shouldn't be in the policy because you might change how you do it. Okay, and most of all, you actually are the first leader in the group because if you're not stepping up to lead, your board won't either. I've really never seen a good board that's a good group of leaders with a director that is not also a leader. And I contend it starts with the director. Because they have term limits, they're coming in and out, and you're that stable person that's there all the time. Yes? Okay, good. I'm glad you like that. You're the continuity, and it's important that you pat yourself on the back and you say, I am the primary leader of this organization. And with my board, we're just really unstoppable. So, officers. How many of you have the president sign checks? Okay, great. It's actually in that statute, those statutes we listed for you. The role of the treasurer is to evaluate. In most places, the director is getting the invoices matched to the statement and has already written the check. And what happens is that the treasurer comes in, before the check is signed, the treasurer comes in and looks at those invoices and statements and okays that for payment. That's really what the treasurer's role is. They're ensuring that you have good receipts. We had a library in our system with a credit card problem. They bought a set of tires for that director's car. The treasurer could not possibly be looking at receipts and comparing them to the Visa card statement, or we wouldn't have bought tires. They weren't that big. They didn't have vehicles. So I put down here an umbrella bond for people handling the money, because I don't think you should be out under covered for liability if you're the one doing all the work. The secretary does those minutes and signs the checks. This is a fraud protection for all concerned. The director should not sign checks. You could put the treasurer on there, but the statutes say it should be the president and the secretary. Now, I have in your packet a facsimile signature thing, and it's about 4 pages down because I decided to talk about it here. I never do the same presentation because I just can't. I'm going to put it together for whoever's involved. Okay, what that facsimile signature, and this is something you need if you want to, you can look into. It's covered under statute. This gives you the statute. You have to go out. What this says is you can have I would give the president and secretary, I would make facsimile stamps for both. They are things you will keep locked up in a drawer or a cabinet. They are, yes. I haven't really ever tried that, but you could. I would assume you could, but it'd be a lot of messing around in the checks. I would make it simple, because a rubber stamp just, even a self-inking stamp does not cost that much. So what you do is you go in to the Secretary of State's forms, and you're looking for Form MN for manual signature. It's called the Certificate of Manual Signature. The person will fill it out, and you'll make a copy for your file, and you'll mail it off to the Secretary of State. If you don't want them to enter it in if you don't want to register it per se, it doesn't cost you a dime. Otherwise, I think the rate's now gone up to 25, but don't quote me on that. I don't register ours, just so you know. Good practice would be that you have one live signature and a stamp if you're going to use facsimile. So that's why I'd get stamps for both. If the board chair can't make it, use his stamp or her stamp, but have the secretary and the treasurer sign. If you have all three, just the secretary is required. It'll give you a little bit more flexibility in the hunt them down, because that's really the hard thing, honestly. That's why directors are tempted, well, they're on the signature card, so I'll just sign that and I'll get somebody else to sign with me. Don't you do that.
I am. I can't hear her though. My stupid. This is not.
So in that case, really, I would get facsimile stamps for all three, and you can surely find one of three to be a live signature. Nobody's going to take you away if you don't do it just exactly right. But the key is here, you keep that locked up. That's a legal signature. I talked to you on here, kind of, I give you a little bit of the how to set it up with your bank. The ones I suggest that you send a letter and you're saying you authorize facsimile signature. Because technically, if you do this and they don't have a legitimate signature on, yes, ma'am.
We have a question from a Zoom group. Sorry.
Signature card, do we still need to be bonded?
If you're handling the money, yes, I would. I don't care whether you're signing the checks, but if you're the one getting all the deposits ready to go, maybe you make a photocopy of the deposits for the treasurer to look at and approve. If you could do that. But most often, you're the one putting the money in the bank in the first place. And so you're handling the money. Yes. In a small library, I'd have the director be in charge of the stamp, because the whole object there is, if the treasurer has it and they take it home, it's not a whole lot of good, because they're never where you want to be when you need to write a check. So it should be kept in the library. It should be also locked up, just like your blank checks are. Well, yes, I would have it discussed in minutes that you're going to allow use of facsimile stamps according to per statute, quote the statute. And I don't know that you have to get into any more detail than that. You just need to have the statute talk about it so everybody understands. That gets down to me into a procedural question, how you're going to do it. The policy is, yes, we're going to have that. And you can create a fiscal policy that talks about handling money in various ways. That could be a nice statement in your fiscal policy that you will allow the use of the facsimile stamp according to statute. Just one sentence kind of under topic. It's not meant to be hard. So the thing is, I know that's why directors sign checks, is they can't find anybody else. But if you have one signature checks, you're just setting yourself up for questions. And I'm saying that's not really your job, and I would back away from that. Yes, ma'am.
At Bison.
And we have it set up to where if the president or the secretary are not available, the vice president may sign in absence of them. Is that?
Well, you know, it isn't really the way it was intended. It does say in the statute, the next one in line to run the meeting, so the vice president could do it. Just make sure they're on the signature card. If they do that,
Policy also.
yeah, you know, you could just say you're going to follow the statute, but for the most part, it's president and secretary. And you can do however you want. Nobody's going to take you away. But I am going to tell you, number one, it's a very, very bad idea for a director to ever sign a check, period, the end. Right. I think facsimile stamps would solve a lot of that hunt them down issue, trying to get two of them in. I told Gail and the group last night at dinner, we had a very unusual set of bylaws that were uncovered. As you know, directors turnover and different things happen. Their board bylaws say that their board meeting is the first Wednesday of the month. Bylaws then go on for some unknown reason and say payroll can be given out anytime up to the second Monday of the month. So they don't issue payroll on that first Wednesday, and it could be 12 days before you get around to second Monday of the month, and it's causing some hate and discontent with the staff. There's only 2 staff, for Pete's sake. And I said, well, I don't blame you. It should be a fixed date of the month or the nearest work. Usually, if you say we pay on the 15th or the closest working day before the 15th, or if you want to pay on the second Monday, that's fine. But pay every second Monday like a slot machine. I mean, you know, we all tie our bills around those checks. And I'm going to be visiting that board and kind of discussing the fact that they're setting themselves up to be sued by the state wage and hour division for mishandling and harassing. I mean, this falls into a whole bunch of categories, and it's ridiculous to have it in the bylaws over and above. Bad enough to do it, but to morally justify it to yourself, I'm going to have to back that off a little bit. It's too bad this is being recorded. You did. No, I did not. I did, but you know, I seriously, my jaw is maybe 6 inches off the floor now, but I drug it around for a long time after that. That just shocked the pants off me. I've done payroll for decades, and you don't do that to people. You just don't do that to people. Anyway, so here's where your paths cross. We've talked about all of these things. If your personnel policy, I will tell you as an aside about money matters, you should look at that anytime staff leaves, but at the very least every 2 to 3 years. It's the most important to me policy you've got, and the one that we pay the least attention to sometimes and can get you into the most trouble if you don't keep it up. I did. There is a tiny link. I can send that out to you. Yeah. You know, and it is your employee hand, you know, it's one of your policies, but you take it out of the board book, you lift that policy out, you put a cover sheet on it that says it's the Bison Library Personnel Policy, and on the back you put a signature sheet that says, I have read and understand this, and sign and date. And so when you hire someone, you have them sign the signature card, it goes, tear it off of the policy, give it to them, and you put that in their personnel file. Because you all have to know that you're playing the same game on the same field. And if you don't have an understanding of your personnel policy, you're not. So there again, the board approves the budget, but the director is going to come up and say, here's what I think. Here's a place to start. So library finance. A fiscal policy, I can send some examples if you'd like. They don't have to be complicated. It could be one of the last ones you add. I think it's a good idea to have some policy around money. I think the treasurer is not discussing whether they like what books you bought. Okay? So you have to work, and sometimes you have to work with the board not to micromanage what you're doing. If they ask questions about it, that's perfectly okay. If they get into a feud about it, that's really not. Approving the checks isn't really oversight. It's a beginning step on the path, but it's really not the true oversight the board should be doing. That's not the most important activity they do every month. So, a budget cycle is an absolutely painful thing. Let's see. Oh, I'm going to back up just a minute. warrant register is the second thing in your list, I think. Now, I don't care if you call it a warrant register. Systems have been around for 50 years and more, so we have some old government terms. Basically, this is a checklist. This is a list of checks, and I gave you the third page of our most recent run of warrants checks so you could see. We have the check number, we have who it was to, a brief description of what it was for, and a dollar amount. And at the end of the list of checks, we have a total, and the motion is to approve check number so-and-so to so-and-so as listed on your checklist for a total of this. Now, we break ours out because we have bills we pay between board meetings. How many of you also pay bills between board meetings? That's something you should have. As for the new librarians, as you get into Apple, Carol talks about this in the library law section. The board needs to pass what's called a standing resolution. They just pass a resolution that is in effect in perpetuity. And it just authorizes that the director to and treasurer to pay bills between board meetings. That doesn't, so they get paid. So, and Carol will tell you in Apple, you make a copy of that resolution and you put it in a file folder that always, or you scan it up into a permanent file folder for permanent records so you can hunt it down when you need it if there's ever a question. You don't want late charges. Late charges are not cute. Your creditors don't like you to be that late. But you do, that's just not something, because the board then, if you notice here, our board is approving some checks that were written in March after our board meeting, before our April board meeting. So that's what that unapproved means. And we have 2 operating funds, legally utilized fund accounts, and we're going to get into that for fun here in a minute. So we break it out how much of those dollars were general fund and how much of those dollars were employee benefit fund. That's why that's the way it is. Okie dokie. Most important thing is a lot of the money stuff is a joint discussion between the board and directors. You never want to blindside your board. They shouldn't hear about something at the grocery store. It's not good for relations. Okay, the fund budget cycle. You're trying to keep track of things in your mind all the time. So in 2017, where we are now, you've brought in the 2016 evaluation. You're beginning to manage 2017, and you're starting to work on 2018, because you have to have that done by June at the very latest, I would guess. So your district, you have a little bit of a reprieve. Systems don't have to have theirs done until July or early August, but cities earlier. So you're running 3 years of thought here, and it's perpetual. Okay, so you get over here, and what you're doing is you're going back, and as you're getting further through your year, you're going back to those assumptions you made in March and April and saying, okay, did utilities, are they going to go up as much as we thought? Where gas price, you're reevaluating. You can't budget any more tax dollars, but you're going to rewrite a finally approved 2018 budget at the end of this year. You fine tune it. Right now, you're rubbing the crystal ball. But so as you get down to here, you're starting to do the recap on 2017. You're starting to operate 2018, and you're planning for 2019. You ride this hamster wheel all the time. And good parts of it, you're down to 2 years of thought for a while there. you're picking up 3. I know I've said this and said this and said this. The next 2 slides are just more driving the point home, setting the stage. Budget and planning are complementary, okay? One doesn't exist without the other. And the better you are at both, the better your library is. If you don't have any long-term goals, you're stuck looking at the end of your feet. You're just reacting, always reacting. To a plan, you plan to budget.
You get it?
Plan to budget to a plan, right. Got it backwards. Yes, he did, and he's absolutely correct. That strategic plan that's so painful and annoying, or long-range plan, or whatever you want to call it, but that look further down the road is important. You also have to have the steps leading up to the long-term plan, because if you only think utopia, then you have no visible steps to get there. So a good plan is a combination of the here and now and the where I want to be and how to get there. All right. I'm almost done riding this horse. Okay. You need to set objectives for your current operational year. You need to have realistic lines of responsibility. We're going to talk more about reporting because I think it's essential. Last statement, a budget is not a cost reduction plan. It's not how to spend the most money you can spend in 10 seconds either. But it's not your responsibility to balance the rest of the world by not being able to do your job well. So it's not, and I will tell you, it's not written in stone. Totally. We'll get into that in a minute. The only thing you're bound by is you can never spend more tax dollars, and we're going to talk about this, than were approved in the city budget for you. And that's a grand total of all taxes. And that's your only limiter. You can't spend more tax money than that, but you can spend every other kind of thing that rolls in the door. And there again, no substitute for a long-range plan. I've now given your consultants work to do for months. I knew that. I knew that. Okay. Let's see. Where are we time-wise? Almost. All right. So we're going to do some discussion about terms and words. Knowing how to define your apples and oranges is kind of essential. Yes, ma'am. Okay, I can give you an example. It's been ringing my phone off the hook, and I don't know what I do with this. Okay, we just put out our accreditation standards for 2018 to 2020. In our budget, in our standards, and our money is tied to our standards. We're meaner. That's not so, but everybody has their different approach to things. But one of the items in our standards is that personnel costs, salary and benefits for the library will be 65% of the budget. All right, now we have libraries that are there. We have libraries that are really close. We have some not so close. And I'm getting a, what do I do? And of course, we have it set up so that they can request a waiver. So they're going to say, no, we're not at 65% right now. But after discussion on a board level, we're looking at, here's our plan to get there in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. Maybe they're going to ask for 5 years. But I want to see evidence of some real serious discussion and a plan. It isn't, no, we don't, but we sure like to. Because there's a lot of things I'd sure like to, and putting that last fork of food in my mouth is one. But, you know, sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. I want a plan, and I want it in writing. So, does that answer? Does that give you an example of something that they really need to be looking at? And it doesn't always have to be salary. It could be vacation days, sick leave days, because those add to benefits. Do you, shudder, have health insurance? Do you have retirement plan? There's really no reason to, even in a small library, not find some ways to offer a benefit or two outside of mandated benefit. I know budgets are tight, so maybe it's you give them a personal day. Something like that. All right. Any idea why I quit? You watch. She's going to walk over here and it's just going to frickin' work. I don't think I touched that. All right. So I'm okay. You just tell me where to. And now you have a green light. Okay. All right. Okay. Good enough. All right. I can arrow. Just when I get to talking ahead, just motion and I'll come over here. Okay, so we're in definitions. These are all banking / investment accounts. Does anybody have any other kind of bank account, you know, something requiring paperwork than I've listed here? Or does this get, yes, ma'am? Okay, so they actually, so you have money in the foundation that will show as an investment. But I'm talking, so you've got a checking account. That's obviously the one where you write checks. Big surprise. You've got a savings account. A savings account, I would ask you to get a savings account that will allow you to transfer money, because I would like all your money sitting in savings. Right now, interest is paltry, but it wasn't always, and I hope it changes. But it's a good practice not to have money sitting in a non-interest bearing account. It's just kind of important. Capital Improvement Fund requires one of those resolutions that you put in that permanent folder. And it is a fund, not one bank account. We're going to talk more about that. We're going to get into the definitions and the multiple uses of the words fund and account. That's coming. That's playing a little bit. Investments. You guys as public libraries can actually be more crazy with your money than systems can. But at the same time, it's a risk relationship. You need to decide if you can afford to lose principal. And Some libraries actually have stock. I would tell you to sell it, but some libraries actually maintain the stock. They've gotten a gift of stock, and they keep it that way. Petty cash is part of your general fund. It's that nice bag or cash drawer you've got at the library, and it needs to be emptied out, and it needs to be tracked and emptied out on a regular basis. It needs a log. It goes up and feeds probably the, I would say, savings account, but you. Library world accounting. You hear all these terms. The one I put in capitals is the one that applies to most all of you. It's cash basis. Kansas has a cash basis law. That means, in the simplest of terms, you don't receive money until it's in the bank. You don't spend money until you write the check. In the very simplest of terms. Hey, would you back me up on that? Yeah? Okay, well, I expect you to pipe in, because I'm sure that he's going to do something called KMAG accounting, which gives me heartburn. We do it, but it's more complicated, and you're not any of you. You're going to do some good cash basis they can convert to KMAG. I'm just telling you, he's doing more modified here and going up into those two areas. We can make numbers harder. Kansas allows you to keep it really simple. So it's up to you to be really clear with it as well. That's no. We are not the state of Kansas. It's really, really hard, especially at your level, because they just take it away midstream. Oh, I'm sorry, we cut your budget 25% or 50%, or, well, there went the plan. You know, kind of hard to tell. All right. Fund accounts. Nonprofits and government entities do fund accounting. And it's based on usually the statute. These all have a statutory basis. Operating fund, general fund has a property tax levy that funds it, along with about 5 or 6 different types of vehicle taxes. Used to have something really cute called local ad valorem tax relief. They snatched it away in the dark of the night several years ago. It hasn't come back. Well, there's that too, but I loved how they took it away. We got stuff snatched early when they had money. They weren't running in the red then. These are going to have had a resolution. This one you don't need to take to your city or your township. This one you do, because your city or township actually has to give final approval of it for you. No. Nope. It's a resolution. It's not a charter ordinance. It's a resolution in statute. There is a form for the resolution. If you go, and I'm fixing this because we found those links were broken, on the public library standards, the Kansas Public Library Standards have a section on this, and they have links to what the format looks like. But it's a resolution of yours, and it might be an ordinance of theirs. You know, the city calls it an ordinance, but it starts with a resolution of yours. Your city can refuse to do it for you, and we'll talk about that later. But that has its own levy. So here's some more fun terms of endearment. fiscal year. The state of Kansas operates a fiscal year that runs July to June. And it's really confusing to know what fiscal year you're in. This is fiscal year 2017 right now, but it was also fiscal year 2017 last November. Starting in July, for the state entities, it's fiscal year, and schools operate this way as well. Fiscal year 2018 starts on July 1. The feds go October 1st to September 30th. You guys make sense. You go a calendar year, January to December. So your fiscal year and your calendar year are the same thing. If you're talking to another organization doing collaboration, you talk about money, make sure you understand how each other's fiscal year operates, because that helps with understanding when cash is available. Okay, we talked cash basis. Fund accounting, you have bank accounts that reflect in each of those funds. Okay? And I have used the word funds to mean money. I don't have the funds for that. I hate things that have multiple meanings, but the two words you use the most related to money have multiple meanings, funds and accounts. Know what you're talking about. Make sure you understand what the other person is saying. Carryover, we're going to go into a really kind of detailed discussion about carryover, but in simple terms, it's the money you have in the bank at the end of the year that's available to be spent now. That isn't tied up in a capital improvement fund or an endowment you can't touch. I mean, technically, that I know that's part of the budget, but just don't yell at me yet, Steve. No, I would disagree. That on carryover, what I'm telling you to do is spend every last tax dollar you got in the year. You're going to carry over 0 tax dollars. I want you to carry over system money if it's allowed. Well, but to them, that's your tax dollars. That's their system grant. Fines and fees and photocopy money and fax money and every other kind of money you've got, your gift from your foundation, gift from your friends, memorials. What I want to see you carry over is enough money to operate at least 2 months. Because you may wait 2 months to get your first tax distribution. And gee whiz, people like to eat every day. You've got to have something to pay the light bill, keep the door open. So we recommend 1 to 2 months. Now, you can have revenue, expense, and encumbrance. You can have income, expenditure, and encumbrance is a complicated term I may or may not talk about today because I would leave that to your money, God. Most libraries don't need to encumber, to be really honest. That means that you're trying to spend money ahead in simple terms. I'm going to take my budget for 2016 and I'm going to kind of pre-book those books I've ordered that aren't going to maybe come till I won't get the bill till January. I'm going to set it up so when I pay it, it shows that it was 2015 or 2016 money. Complicated. But you get into a need for encumbrance, that's when you call him. GAAP, generally accepted accounting principle practices, and I'll tell you right now, they don't like cash basis. So every CPA you deal with that audits for city is kind of half miffed, but they'll get over it. Governmental accounting standards boards, those are the ones that set all those GAAP rules. Here's another set of things that you'll hear mostly in double entry bookkeeping, but I stuck them there in case you do double entry bookkeeping. Debits and credits, assets and liabilities. Google those. I don't want to confuse you if you don't use them, but I think it's important that you know that you've heard them. So, fill in the blank. You've got a sheet there, and I did not get put up here. You can write this down. You will use the word funds, plural, 3 times. You will use the word fund, singular, 4 times. You will use the word account 3 times. You will use the word accounts, plural, 3 times. You'll use the word expense once, and the word money once. Now, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to fill out that sheet and see if you start to understand why your sheet looks like this, why it gets confusing for you when you start to talk to somebody else about your money. Oh, well, I'm not, you don't know if it's working. Fund accounting is used by nonprofits and government entities. You don't often think of yourselves in terms of doing fund accounting, but you do, even if all you have is a general fund. Okay? So in accounting software and other places, a chart of accounts, and you should always have a list of accounts, even if you're doing it on paper. you should have a good chart of accounts list that lists the bank accounts and the expense, you know, your investments, what they, you know, what you're calling them. I would recommend walking a chart of accounts through with the board and making sure how what you call it is what they think of when you say that, because it's not always the same thing. And you don't realize that sometimes until you get into a really deep discussion. So it's part of that being clear. It has to, a financial accounting can't make sense if you can't understand it. And if it's too complicated, simplify that. So it's a listing of all the library's accounts, income and expense. So collection development, if you want to call that materials, whatever you want to call it, it's an expense. Okay? It's an expense account. Okay? There's a carryover balance each year in each fund. If you only have a general fund, the dollar amount you end up with there should equal the amount that you have in all your cash. Okay, so if I have a checking account and a savings account, the money that's in both of those accounts added together, and I'm going to get into this, should equal what's in that fund. That's the double check when you do that report, so you know you did it right. Okay. To pay each bills each month, you transfer between, okay, you transfer funds, and this is funds in terms of money. Okay, third definition. Funds in terms of money between accounts. So I'm saying when you know that bills are going to be $500, you transfer $500 from savings to checking. If your checking doesn't earn any interest, keep the minimum amount in there to cover the 1 or 2 checks you might write outside of the big bill paying slug. Don't keep the tax money in the checking account. Keep it in the savings account and move it over, even if all you get is 51 cents. Someday it might be more. So, do we have the funds for that expenditure? That's there again, that's another, do we have enough money? That's the dough. Do we have enough dough for that? Social Security would be an employee benefits expense account. So you plan on how much money you're going to need for Social Security, which is in the larger category of benefit. It's spent from the, it can be spent, I should have said, can be spent from the Employee Benefits Fund, which is legally established, has its own levy, gets its income from the Employee Benefits Fund levy. Most of you don't have one. And it may be a good idea for some of you. We'll talk about that later. How much money do we have in the checking account? That's a big question. That's every month. You bought what? And have we spent all the memorial funds? People will call it, you know, money, whatever. That's really not a legally established fund. So it's funds in terms of money. Have I confused you thoroughly? Okay. That's right. Yeah. No, it's just meant to show you that these are words that have different connotations in different situations. And I can't tell you enough, have in your mind what you really mean when you talk about it. Say my checking account rather than the bank or general fund. Yes?
Tell me what cash basis.
Yeah, well, I was going to do that coming up, but no, in simple terms, the credit card is an evil necessity in today's world for online ordering. But if you don't have the money to cut the check right then, don't order it. If you don't have enough, this is not a float. You know, if you think about it that way, I'm paying for this online because I have to in terms of convenience. I'm going to get that book from Amazon or whatever, but you should never do it without knowing you have the money in the bank to pay for it. And there is no partial payment of credit cards. When that bill comes in, it's paid. When that bill comes in, it's paid. Because you're cash based. I mean, that's how I explain it.
Using your own personal credit card to order material.
Never, ever, ever. Or you give them the receipt and you get reimbursed that month. You're not carrying them. You're awfully red. Well, you know, it's okay to do it, but number one, you're going to pay tax that the library wouldn't have to pay. And number two, if you do it, get reimbursed that month. Yes. Yeah. That's one reason carryover is so critically important. So, does everybody want to get up and stretch and go to the bathroom and get some more water? And I'll give you 5 minutes. Run!
So before Laura gets started again, somebody suggested I talk about our mess out in the hallway that you on Zoom can't see. When I came about 9 years ago, we have a record retention room, and it got more full and more full since I've been here. But it has shelves on both sides, file cabinets in the back, and it's about, I don't know, maybe a third the size of this room. And it was so full with boxes down the middle, boxes in front of each shelving unit that if you stood sideways, you could walk down each side and sort of look for things. And just yesterday, Steve and our maintenance man, Fred, and myself, and Chris Ripple was helping, emptied that out. So you see in the hallway, we have about 275 bankers boxes full of records for the last 40 to 50 years. And the reason that we did this is because almost all records don't have to be kept longer than 7 years. There is, I think that you have it pulled up on our website. Gail can tell you where it is on our website. There's a record retention schedule because you have personnel records, financial records, meeting minutes, and there are certain things that you never throw away, like meeting minutes, but you only need one copy. Anything historical about the library or the library building, you never throw away. But anything personnel, anything financial, anything accounts payable, we're talking about 7 to 10 years that you need to keep. And after that, anything related to personnel should be shredded and not just put out for general consumption in the dump. So those kinds of records should be shredded. There are companies around that will come and do the shredding for you, because if you have years and years of this kind of stuff, doing it yourself is really daunting. It would take us forever to shred what we have here. So what I want to show you is the record retention schedule that tells you how long to keep things and when you can get rid of them. So the suggestion is that you go back 7 to 10 years to get rid of anything that isn't historical, and then you mark the boxes, and as you put them into your record retention room, you write on the box the date that it can be shredded or destroyed. And some people say put destroyed or trash if it's just can be thrown out, or if it should be shredded, you should write shred on it and the date. And then you keep those records circulating, and every year when you put your box in that room, you take out the old one to make room for more.
That's a do what he says, not do what he did. So let's see here. Where are we? Right here. And we're going to say, well, move yourself up. No, I don't want to talk to you. Show concurrent slide. So we're ready to go on to the next part of the meal. So what are you in charge of? And how do you take care of it? We're talking money here. I love this woman. At the very first, you can't find the original image anymore. At least I haven't been able to. If anybody can, I will kiss you forever. I just love this lady whistling while she works, and the money's falling out the back end of the bag. It happens. The very first class I taught on fiscal responsibility. So I got to stick her in there, even though she's really pixelated. Okay, back to those nasty bank accounts. The details on how to take care of them are reconcile everything monthly. If you have something in a savings account that gets interest every 3 months, reconcile it every 3 months, because you'll have an entry. but reconcile all your bank accounts every month. That if you have long-term investments, you're going to reconcile those when they open up and credit the interest. But definitely your checking account and your, a money market, if you have that instead of a savings. Anytime there's activity in an account, it should be reconciled that month. Does that make it simple for everybody? If you've had a transfer out of the account, you need to reconcile, even if you don't have interest earned, because you've taken money from this one to put over in this one. So you should use, how many of you use QuickBooks? Any of you? Good. It's real easy to do. In QuickBooks or any accounting software, do not force the issue. If you get down there and you're off 5 cents, do not hit reconcile now, because it's going to do an accounting maneuver you don't understand, and you've got a finger error somewhere. Do not reconcile now until it's 0. Do not do a hard force. Yes, no. That's just against all things holy in accounting. There's a problem, find it. So you reconcile everything. In checking, keep a minimal balance. I would make all deposits to your savings account. I will tell you, if you have a savings account and your state aid is coming into your checking account, if you're doing direct deposit and it's coming into your checking account, get in touch with them. And I think Megan would be who you get in touch with, probably. Megan Schultz at the State Library, and say, I need a new direct deposit form so I can give you a different account number. Have it go to savings. That's my pet peeve about how people do things. It isn't anything that's legal. If you like it how it is, fine. I'm just electronic. They will do them electronically. It saves them time and money. That just means that that's another good reason to reconcile monthly, because it's going to show up and you're not going to be aware. They will do direct deposit, my understanding is, for anybody. So if you're getting a paper check, contact them and say, let me fill out the form so I can go direct deposit. Okay. Capital Improvement Fund bank accounts. You can have as many as you want. Banking accounts that fall into this fund category. You could have one that's a money market account so that you could pay for capital items easily out of it. So you would need a savings, checking, money market, whatever, called Capital Improvement Fund Money Market. You may have longer term investments you want to do. You may have CDs of varying lengths. I would recommend that. Interest rates change over time. But make it so that you could actually get to the money at some point and move it into the money market. The whole point there isn't to polish the nest egg. It's to actually talk about what its purpose is and where it fits into long-range spending. Okay. You, on a capital improvement fund in any of the bank accounts. So in my general fund, when I'm budgeting, I can plan to put money in my capital improvement fund. I'm not bound by it if things go south and the year was worse than I anticipated. But say in my budget, I plan to put $500 in my capital improvement fund. I'm going to show that as a proposed expense out of my general fund, which would then be a deposit to my capital improvement fund. But I'm not required to do it. The second thing is, any amount of money you put in the capital improvement fund is okay. Of all other types of money, think of it as colors if you want to, if it helps. But fines, fees, your system grant, if they have an unspecified portion of it that they don't have you report back on. Memorial money, you can put any amount of that in a capital improvement fund, but you're limited to put only 10% of your tax money in the capital improvement fund. You can't put more tax dollars than 10%. It's kind of confusing, but as we play in the budget a little more, that might help. Sure. Sometimes you'll show it on your budget what you would love to do. Just know that you aren't legally required to do it. If you don't have enough money to eat for the at carryover time at the end of the year, don't put it in. Yeah. Well, in most cases, really, honestly, you don't get enough tax money to where it's the majority of your funding. You're laughing. The smaller the library, the more the system is the big god. Honestly, you're going to have spent. So if you're to say, I get $5,000 of tax money. At the end of the year, I've spent $8,000. I'm telling you, I spent the first 5,000 of that I spent was tax money. Well, you know, if I end the year with such a big, large amount in the checking account that I feel I have to get rid of some, what I'm going to do is look back and I'm going to say, okay, what was 10% of tax money? If I want to. If I've already spent enough to cover all my tax dollars, I'm going to say I put every other kind of money in there. It's mentally how you put it, what pocket you put it in. And talk it over with Steve when you get to the end of the year. You don't have to do it in December. If you really know you're flush, you can do it anytime you want to, put money in the capital improvement fund. But yeah, now if you're do we have the public library handbook? Okay. We'll show that after lunch or something, but if you look that up and you look at the capital improvement fund, it talks about how you get money back out of that if you need it for operations. Otherwise, I would say one of your capital improvement fund bank accounts is like a money market with checks. So you're paying directly. Technically, you could transfer it into your general fund and then write it on the general fund. But for your auditor, this is a direct line of accounting that's a little cleaner. I would just write a capital improvement fund check for that, whatever it was. Has to be something tangible, has to be something durable. Can't be something, so it has, that's why, computers are actually marginal, really, but everybody does it. Different states define capital improvement money in different ways. I will tell you that too. Investments, there again, public libraries actually can hold stock. You could have treasury bills, you could have CDs, you could have all different, a regular savings account is really a form of investment, but it earns interest. You don't get enough money, you can afford not to get every little thin penny out of the whole bit. So you can't afford to give up interest. It's not noble, it's stupid. You earn money on your money. The only time you won't is if you get a certain type of grant from some grantors, government, read government there, that will say you can't earn money on our money. I have an example of that every year is we have a courier grant for that the state helps subsidize the operation of the courier. That goes in my checking account. It's the only thing. Because it actually says that I can't earn money on that. Some LSTA money is like that. Just know whether you can or can't. Okay, petty cash is under the director's control. I don't care if you do a spiral bound notebook and you write copies, 25 cents, whatever. I would tie that off at a minimum once a week and I would take it to the bank. Once a month. I had a library that lost, that same director that bought tires. They speculated that she managed to pull, because they sold an incredible amount of things at that library. Note cards and Christmas ornaments and this and that. And they think that she got about $5,000 out through the petty cash. They did take her to court. She did have to make restitution. But it was something that went on for quite a while. And that board was not paying attention. Okay? They were actually covered under the bond. So they were made whole, and she made restitution to the insurance company. But when she had to do that to stay out of jail. She actually paid all the money back. I have to give her props for that. But I was appalled at how much money she pulled out of petty cash. I don't care. I know it's a pain. At least once a month. That's only 12 times a year. Yes. Yeah, I probably, if I were working the drawer, the first thing the desk, first thing I'd do is reconcile the cash. So petty cash works like this. If I have $50 to start petty cash, and you sit down at the desk and you're going to start the day, and you've got $20 in cash and coin, then you better have $30 worth of receipts sitting in there, or there's already a problem. And you call your director. Or if you are the director, you know you're going to be cash short. You need to watch that. I would start reconciling petty cash a lot more often. Yes. Well, and I will also tell you, Sam's has some really cheap cash registers. And I'm sure somebody could teach you how to run it. It's not hard. And maybe that's how that you make the cash register your petty cash. And then you can run a tape every night or once a week. Yeah. No. Ah. You know,
These are reasons that if you look at this overall, there is a system of checks and balances with everything.
Well, and you want to make sure you've got both, that you are doing the check and balance.
did
So you
unmute.
know you're in charge. You're the director. All eyes are going to click at you when you say, "Hey, you know, I think that somebody's lifting money out of the petty cash." It's really bad when you're the only employee. No, well, no, you know, it could be a really good teenager too. Distraction. Could you go get me? You know, that's another reason sometimes a cash drawer, cash register isn't a bad investment. If you have a friends group, it might be a nice thing to have.
Ended up being based on how complicated it can get. We had 2 people calculate, 2 people initial the envelope, the amount of money. They usually put it in the safe, but everybody has a key to the door room with the safe. So now they slip it under my door, which there are only a limited amount of keys for. And every morning I take that money to the secretary. She reconciles it and makes sure it's the right amount in the envelopes. So we had to go to some pretty lengthy steps to make sure that we are not losing money, because we did.
The other thing you can do is, if you have a community that actually has a bank with drive-through hours, and that's probably the bank you're using, is you can get a money bag. You can drop it in there when the library closes and go pick it up on the way in to the library. You don't want to keep much money in the library. Put a sign up that says money is not kept on premises. Even if you're keeping $20, just put the sign up and move on, because you don't want any outside interest either. That's most often a staff issue, but not always. Okay, so here's that purchasing stuff we were talking about. A lot of times you have a charge account with a local merchant, and this becomes procedural. You need to decide how people go down and charge. I used to tell people I wanted their initials and that LAD 1031. That means Laura Devon went down and charged this on October 31st. So when I got the receipt, you know, back, when they brought stuff, they went down to charge, I wanted to see on it that they had that on there and that I knew what they went to get. Those need monitored. You need receipts. If they lost a receipt, like the dog ate my homework, there are 2 choices there. If it's a local merchant, get a copy of it from them. If it's not, and you feel comfortable unless proven otherwise, have the person who lost the receipt write you a memo that said, on this date, I purchased these items, and the dollar amount was approximately, because they never remember, this much. I know that auditors don't always get hyped up about bank receipt or gas receipts for some reason, but when I used to reconcile those out, the receipts to the statement, I would say, okay, we have a car log for our system. You have the log. So I'd go back on the date of the purchase and I'd say, write me a little memo. You got gas, no receipt. It made me feel better. And that's where a lot of those surprise purchases happen. There's really no receipt for them and nobody questioned. And that's a treasurer's responsibility, but the board is trusting that treasurer to do that. You can set credit card limits on credit cards. You can't charge over X amount of money on that card. On gas cards, you can limit what can be purchased, and we just let them purchase gas. We're kind of a pain that way. You want to pop, use your own credit card. I wasn't always popular. Once a month on payday, a lot of big smiles. Fines and fees. Set a procedure. There again, how am I going to handle that? People a lot of times just stick it in the petty cash bag. You know, so this can be, that petty cash can be money accumulated outside of the petty cash, or if you're, so if I have $50 in petty cash and I count the money and I have $100 in the bag and I have $25 worth of receipts, I better have $25, right? Oh, $75 of other income on a log somewhere that said it was this much photocopies and this much fines for late books, whatever. That's why I kind of like the cash register. It lets you run them all in. And you don't have to mail as much stuff as you used to. We got a courier for that, right? Okay, deposits and check writing. We talked about bonding. We talk about depositing on same day received. Why don't you pull this out? We're getting into, I do a version of this for our libraries. Okay, well, you guys can paste over that and put the right, but know when you're getting your system money, because if you're not direct deposit, that can get lost in the mail. So know when you get your system money. Up here, I'm telling you, when statute says that your money has to be at the county level, that the county has to kick it out the door by these dates. So by January 20th, that your counties, and in a lot of cases it's before that date, slightly, but your county has mailed to your city, direct deposited actually, a wad of money to the city that is a bunch of, that is city money and other people's money, yours included. So if I were you, I would know when the city commission meets, city council meets in February or possibly January, depending on how it falls. If your council meets the second and fourth Mondays of the, second and fourth weeks of the month, and it's after that second board meetings after the 20th, I would see if I could maybe get my money. Now, some councils only want to approve money once a month. In that case, you probably would have to wait till the next meeting. Legally, they don't have to approve giving you that money because it's not theirs to approve. It's your money. And they should just cut you a check, but they don't always want to make it that simple. And it does, it doesn't fit their accounting scheme or whatever. But know that it's not money they have to approve. It comes from the county and it's broken down by type of money, by type of tax. If you're not getting that breakout, you need to know what it is. You need to get that. We talked about having what I call a standing motion, or a resolution that says we're going to allow bills that fall due between board meetings to be paid by their due date. Payroll taxes. Oh, and state grant and aid, I talked about when it shows up. Anymore, Joe Butler has been really, really good about kicking that state aid check out in February. Used to sometimes run into April, but now she kicks it out the door before they can get their hands on it, is what it amounts to. Know that as you're budget planning for 2018, you should plan on at least a 10% reduction. I would plan on at least a 10% reduction. I would probably, in my budget planning, do 50% of what I got this year for state aid. Now, if you get more money, you can spend it. It's not tax dollars in your calculation. Okay? They don't have many other things to cut. And now I understand we're under $1 billion shortfall for 2 years, but barely. kind of like down to the 800 and some odd million. Eventually, that's real money. And she doesn't have many pots left for opening budget years. She's either going to have to look at staff, state aid, or some other things closer and dearer to our house, like statewide ILL could be compromised in some way or affected. We hope not. We hope it never goes that far.
Pay for our library, for our public library, we have an increase for grant every year. More of out that we're losing state aid, so keep that in mind.
Right.
And the proposed budget for next year as well.
Right. We're trying to help as much as we can. I would rather see you work on maximizing incrementally your tax income from your municipality. If you get more state aid, you can spend it. I am only putting half of what I got. Well, last year when I did this for 2017, I didn't put any money in for state aid. I zero budgeted it. I got, well, I knew I was going to get some, but I also knew I could spend it. And I didn't have, that wasn't part of my cap. So you have to have a little thought process there. Okay, payroll reports. This is the one area that I have found that has some of the most interesting love letters from the government you could possibly have. And I and I tell you, the people you don't want to have on your bad side is the Department of Labor. The unemployment people will come take you away for 25 bucks. They get nasty. I mean, you get a letter that says you either bring this up to date or a warrant will be issued. It's like, oh my God, that's a whole big $8.49. So, you act like you've had some of these issues. No, but you get to inherit the remnants. You were in the love letter phase. Well, we had one, we had a library where the treasurer of the library was also in the county clerk's office at the county. And she did payroll for the county. And she wasn't paying payroll taxes. They were being used for other activities. To the point where it was discovered when the director changed, it was 18 months worth. She miraculously came in and made restitution. They were so fortunate because they didn't have her bonded on top of that. They were, she gave, I meant to, I'm sorry. And here, it wasn't, I didn't pay them. She was reimbursing them because she'd spent the money. She was showing it on books as paid on the board report. That's why you also want to see that confirmation from the entity that by golly, it was paid. You get some interesting things. First thing there is the most important thing. The payroll date is when the check is issued. I don't care what hours or weeks or months back that up. People tie themselves in knots saying it's the January check for December time. To the IRS and everybody else, it's your January paycheck. So just think about it that way. Don't get hung up on what hours are in the paycheck. The date of the check is the date. It's the date of payroll is the date that check's issued. And so that library I was talking about that had that 12-day slop fund when the person could get paid, God knows when that pay date is. Anyway, so your cash basis, the extra complication to cash basis means you don't do it like other businesses do. The state will allow you to pay it by the 15th of the next month. That's not true cash basis. So if you have monthly deposits that have to go out, if you're a monthly depositor, you should be depositing that money right as you do the last payroll of the month. If you're a quarterly filer, if you have to pay quarterly, you can put the money in quarterly. The government tells you. And the state, most of you, I would guess, are at least quarterly filers. Some of you could be yearly filers on income tax, but almost nobody is anymore because the state wants the money sooner. And I tried to put the links in here to the online filing because you should all be doing online filing. The only thing that's paper for you guys is what they call the paper 941, the quarterly 941. So if I'm a monthly depositor, I'm putting money using their online banking. They're sucking money out of my bank account every month based on payroll. And then quarterly, I do this paper recap that I have to mail in. Okay. Now you can have somebody else do that, but it costs money and I'm tight. You can do it on paper for free. You can go IRS 941 is the paper form. Print it out. If you've got software, if you use QuickBooks, it generates a paper 941 for you to mail. They'd be glad to do it as one of the providers online, but it costs money. And it could vary. It can be anywhere from $12 to $25 or $40 every quarter. And I got better things to spend money on. I would also tell you I would bother to mail that certified because you could get it lost in the mail, literally, and it's not funny. So on this thing I gave you, the last, and this is really a high over payroll, but I gave you the quarter reporting periods, which are calendar based. And know that W-2s for employees and 1099s for those people you hire to do things like mow the yard, snow removal, whatever. If you spend $600 on someone like that, or the person that comes in and cleans the library, if they're not on staff and they earn $600, you have a contract with them and you issue a 1099. $600 a year. Steve can help you fill out the form, but it just have a basic agreement. Harry can probably send you one. I could send you one. It just says, we're hiring you to clean. You bring your own supplies. You may give them some supplies, but it's their responsibility and they have to be insured. So if they fall and break their leg while they're vacuuming, it's on them. Okay? Anybody have any questions on these? I'm going to tell you that the money in October and December is almost always motor vehicle money. You occasionally get some delinquent money, but that sometimes they will hold because they've collected more than they estimated in the budget. Legally, they should give it to you. Kind of a gray area. Sometimes you can smile real sweetly and say, I know this is due. I'd be glad to come over on the 31st and pick that check up.
Public libraries in March.
50%, and then in June, September/October, those are equal payments of the remaining 50%. Did I not say that? No, you did it. I just wanted to clarify it because I gave you the wrong information.
Sorry, stuck that in my apron. The important thing is when you get money in, the bank doesn't care who takes it to them. And if you have a picky treasurer, make a photocopy of the deposit slip and a photocopy of the checks. Staple it, save it for them. Get the money in the bank. It doesn't do anybody any favors in the drawer. I can't tell you how many times I've had to reissue because it went in the purse and it was lost. The treasurer took it home. The dog ate it, literally. It's nice. If we're going to give you a grant check, we want to think you need it. So put it in the bank. Because if you go 2 months without depositing it, I'm rethinking, geez, you have too much money. I mean, just a thought. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
How do you feel about direct deposit payroll?
I love it. But you're going to have conversation. I don't know where you are. Some banks charge so much per check. It can be cost prohibitive. If you can get your bank to do it, you do need everyone on staff to do it. And that can be a tough sell sometimes. I don't want my husband to know how much I make here. I cashed this check and it's mine. Would you mind opening your own bank account? You actually, we have what we call substitute librarians, and sometimes they don't. So it's a program we have in our system. If a library has less than 2 FTE, meaning they have 2 employees or less, or they equal less than that much, we will pay a substitute to come in to your library to run your library while you're at CKLS meeting. Okay, so you can get to those trainings and do that kind of stuff. The caveat there is we're making them find that person themselves, and then that person has to get the hurdle of our Nexpress or your Pathfinder coordinator's approval to use the back end of your system. So there is a little training involved, but those people sometimes don't want a paper check, direct deposit, and I'll cut a paper check, but everybody else. So it doesn't have to be absolutely 100%, but you really want it to be as much as you can get there. Yes? Don't hesitate to slap me if I say something wrong. Okay. Very few of you have to have an audit because you don't have more than 500,000 now in expense a year. If you're between 25 and 275,000 and 500,000 expense in a year, you now have to have a financial review by a CPA. Yeah, no. Now, if you have somebody that would come in and do a simplified review for just to make sure the payroll taxes are paid, if you have somebody in town with accounting experience that the board would consider appropriate and you can afford it, it's just like on club books where they have an auditing committee. Get somebody else outside to sort of review your stuff and see if you can't get that as a favor or free, for a low cost. And I will tell you, I'm working on developing some real simple procedures for those kind of libraries that you make less than $275,000 of expense in a year. But I'm saying find that authority that will do that simple check for you. Doesn't have to be a CPA. You're better off having outside eyes on the books than not. So that's a thought. The other thing here is we're going to talk some more about board reports and why I like them to work. Oh, I got to keep talking really fast. Okay, so we have on income. You can revenue receipts, income. They're kind of interchangeable. They have different technical accounting term definitions. I'm not going to go there. I gave you the time frame for your money. The thing about you can spend donations, memorials, and gifts at any time. The same is true with grants. Doesn't go against that tax expenditure limit. The hard part is classifying the money when it comes in. What kind of money is it? Where does it need to go? So, reports. They have to have, your board, and I don't know why I didn't catch this. QuickBooks or PowerPoint did this. PowerPoint was smarter than I am, which is really a bad thing to say. It's an annoying program. Okay, if your board can't talk about the money reports you're giving them, you need to have a discussion about what do you want to see? What does it mean? Is it what I'm calling the account name that you don't understand? Get some discussion, because it should make sense to a perfect outsider. When you do an annual report, your money should make sense. If it doesn't, you're making it too hard for somebody. They're benchmarks. So I want to know if I'm tracking. Now, budget is me going, and I'm doing this in April or May. And I've even kind of tweaked it in November and done the final approval of the budget. But I really need to watch income first. Because if I'm getting a lot less income than I anticipate, I've got to do something on the other end. I have to quit spending something. So tracking to the budget is important. Now, I contend you have better analysis if you're going to have to overspend the utilities line, for example, costs more. Show you're overspending that, but know that you have to underspend something else by the same amount or you've got problems. I know, it's so boring. I'm sorry. No, you're okay. I do it myself. Yes.
At some point, are you going to talk about a consent agenda so that a lot of this discussion doesn't have to be done at a board meeting, but they can look at it and have questions that can be answered and not discuss the whole.
Well, right. You can approve these. We'll get to the reports. We'll talk about it. You can approve them in a consent agenda, but I think periodically it's okay to approve them and then come back and have or take a minute after they made the motion to really give them your short recap of what you see as analysis. Yeah.
Financial report is a training tool.
Oh, and it takes time. The light bulb will come on, you can almost see it. Oh, yeah, that's fine. And because it that way for everybody. Fund reports and what I call asset reports are combined. You can't see this too well. There's a little swoosh. Didn't print out in your handout. I call it a treasurer's report. You could call it a fund and asset report. I don't care what you call it, but it's one report you can do that breaks your money out by funds, so you know how much you have in the different funds. And at the bottom, you've got the bank accounts. And by golly, the total of the fund and the total in the bank accounts, if they don't equal, it's not right. So, so it helps you decide investments. You may not do some of those investments as soon as you thought, like pulling money to capital improvement fund. It helps keep the train on the track. So this I printed out. You have a copy of it and I had a hard drive crash that they thought they had assured me was being backed up. And it wasn't BitTorrent. I forget. That was one reason that network administrator I let walked. I wasn't backing up my dock or my desktop where I parked my light. Okay, I had a hard drive crash, and oops, he'd done something and broken it, and it quit backing up, and it ate everything. Oh, I was not happy. Now, for those of you in Apple, I will have these updated by the time you to the right year and everything. Don't worry about the year. Let's discuss format. You don't have to do this. This is just my take. And I use Tonganoxie. This is one we developed for them when they had a new director, obviously a while ago, 2006 in actuality. This is her January or her December treasurer's report. She's got a carryover amount of money that comes up here from her November treasurer's report, ending balance. These numbers down here from November go up here. Then she's showing the money that she has come in the month of December. Notice that that money could be operating fund money. Usually you don't have to do petty cash as often, but you could show the growth of petty cash. This is only done if you have an employee benefit fund. Otherwise, that money is all going to be spent down. But so when I get tax money, she didn't want to break it out on this report. You don't have to break it out on every report. Fine. So she would have tax money. She'd get so much general fund money and so much employee benefit fund money. She broke hers out on her itemized budget, and I'll show you that in a minute. So the key here is it's a one-page report. You get multiple pages for a board. They go to sleep as soon as they flip the page. They try. They really try, but it's so anything you can get. So here's all the money that came in. And then she has a total of deposits. So then she has what she called a subtotal for fund balances. She added this number and that number, and she's got her subtotal. Am I tracking you so far? So she has subtotals in all these. So like capital improvement fund money, she'd show all the bank accounts all here in one lump sum. Okay, checks that were issued. If you had checks that were issued in, usually, so that does not mean a separate check. So if I'm doing payroll and I have an employee benefit fund, some of the money's coming out of general fund for salary, and some of the money's coming out of the employee benefit fund for the library part of Social Security and Medicare. Right. This is breaking it out by funds. Now it'll take you a while to get your head wrapped around this, but it's a double check for you too. And it ties back to that fund balance, that register checklist of register. You know, I gave you a checklist and it had a total. So if I'm doing this for December and I've got $25,000 worth of checks that got approved, I'm breaking it out by fund, but the net result over here is $25,000, or I did something wrong. They tie, they come back, it's a double check. Net result is you take this number, you subtract this one, and that's your ending fund balance. Then you go down here and you've reconciled your checking account to agree with what you have in the bank at the end of the month. She's doing this in January. She's giving it to the January board meeting because it's really hard to give up to the second reports. And it's better to have totally double-checked, verifiable prior month reports. So these you put in what was my actual checkbook balance at the end of the month. put that petty cash. How much did I have in petty cash? How much did I have in my capital improvement funds? You could list them all. My money market. That's just a double check she wanted to do. But you notice down here, on here when you read it, total cash is equal to the total of the fund balances. And sometimes you get down to that number and you go, oh, bleep. I've made a finger error somewhere. 9 out of 10 times, it's you got in a hurry. This is, okay, now this is Excel. I would recommend every last one of you. What? They are for her. I have people that don't do it that way because they don't want to learn how to write a formula. And I understand that. So sometimes I go visit them and create a formula, workbook with formulas underlying. But you've got to know enough not to mess the formula. Okay? So I would recommend that every last one of you go out on Universal Class or Learning Express and walk yourself through some preliminary Excel. Now, you don't have to be the master of it that my son has to be in his work. He does, okay, he works for Collective Brands Payless. They're back to Payless. And he's the North American manager and Central American manager for men's shoes and some children's shoes. And he does forecasting. Okay, he builds formulas like I can't read it all. I have to really wade through them. That's a level that if you get to, no. But simple things and understanding so that if you have the formula in there and you do something to mess it up, you can kind of figure out how to go back and recreate it. I am a very crippled user of Excel, but I can get what I need to get done, or I can hunt Mike up who's better at it than I am. So know your expert. Find someone. System's full of them. Just know these need to balance. Okay. So that's what I call a treasurer's report. It's giving you, and if you only have a general fund and a petty cash, that's technically all general fund, fine. It could be that simple. But you ought to do it this way so you can keep track. All right, this one I had a little bit of access to, but not enough to make a difference. So this is obviously got the formulas underneath it. This is once we get a budget done, those are the numbers you'd put in here. She is a township library. But these are all the different tax breakouts I would recommend you track. So as you look on that sheet, if you flip over the one we were looking at, should be right there. What you're going to find is sometimes you usually get more delinquent money than you estimate. I'd look at what you got last year and just estimate. Or actually, I tracked 3 years. I looked to see if it was an anomaly or is it about so much. Because nobody gets 100% of the property tax you thought you needed. Because not everybody in the county pays their taxes on time. So that's what delinquent tax is. Motor vehicle, recreational vehicle, 16 and 20 ton truck, watercraft, commercial vehicle. Those are all the vehicle taxes. Those are what you call a pass-through tax. You get an estimate from the treasurer, the county treasurer, the city does, and they estimate what they think you'll get on a very complicated little formula we'll do this afternoon. please come back. It won't be as bad as you think. But oftentimes, when times are good, these vehicle taxes are more than estimated. Know that your ad valorem tax is never what you thought you'd get, but you kind of have to have an idea. Most often the range is between, I'd say 94% to 98% of tax. What you put on the budget, you're going to get 94 to 98% of it on property tax. And hopefully, since you got less of that, you get more motor vehicle. If you don't, there again, you're adjusting your budget. Down here are the things that you spend money on. They have to mean the same thing to you as they do to your board. Okay? That's what I call a budget to actual spreadsheet. I can see what we thought we were going to get. I can see what I got this month. You don't always have to have this column if you don't want to. You can make it year to date only. Some cities do, some libraries do that, and some don't, because it really doesn't matter, but it would tie to exactly what's on the warrant register here. If you did current month, it would be the exact same dollars here and here on the treasurer's report. So there's some commonality. But the key here is, what percentage of income did I get? What percentage of budget did I expend? If you go over 100% in one column, you have to be under 100% somewhere else. Right. Okay. Now, think about these things. Go eat. And does anybody have any questions? Zoom questions or anything? Move around, let this stuff percolate, ask questions. I recommend using Excel for these things. It doesn't have to be complicated, and Learning Express has got some good modules. I haven't looked at Universal Class, but I know they're there. And I would still take the class, so I know when I've messed the formulas up. Yes, ma'am. I would take my QuickBooks information over on Excel, because QuickBooks budget sheets are ungodly. They're great if you fill them in to get charts and graphs and some of that information, but they get longer and longer and longer and longer. And I think if it's off one page, your board loses interest. They can't do the best job. They have enough trouble. It needs to be simple. And I would say once every 3 months, give them a picture, give them those charts too, because some people understand things visually better. Some people can handle the numbers. Anything else? Have a good lunch. I'll see you at 1:30.
Yes, we'd like for you to be back in your seats at 1:30. Remember, from 1 to 1:30, the room on the opposite side of me will be open for book giveaways. There's a lot of really great treasures in there. And then I just want to bring your attention to this. Every library will be getting one of these in the courier. This is the proposed system plan and the proposed budget. Yes, and there's information in here that you'll need to review, and every library should field a voting representative to the business meeting on the 24th of May at Spring Fling in Salina. You vote the interest of your library, and so you should discuss this with your board. So again, the book giveaway from 1 to 1:30 back here, and same place as always, and be back here at 1:30. Thank you.